Hello and welcome to another episode of It Came From the Page. And yes, this is late. This is a late wrap-up for the first week of Horror MAYhem. And the reason why this didn't come out on the weekend like I wanted it to is because it was storming all week here. And if you've never had nerve damage, let me tell you, humidity fucks you up. Humidity will pretty much ruin your day. So I was almost completely brain fogged out, very weak, very, very miserable this weekend. So mostly this weekend I only listened to audiobooks. I didn't even get down to any of my Horror MAYhem stuff. But hey, it's Monday, and it's going to storm today. So I had to make sure I got this in before the storm, because then again I would probably be like, bleh, and it would be terrible. So anyways, let's get started. This was great. I love this prompt just because it's all about like reading shorter stories and shorter fiction and shorter books. And I really should read shorter books more often, because it's really, really fun to just sit down and just finish a book in a day. And I'll tell you which ones I finished in a day. But yeah, it was fun. The only short story I actually decided to check out this time was The Little Sisters of Illyria, which is a Stephen King story from Everything's Eventual. And that's because I made the mistake of starting the Dark Tower series, and it was chronologically where I am in that series. So I decided to listen to that, to actually read that little short story. But now for the book. So this is like supernatural horror. I went for some creature features for mine. They're kind of supernatural. Some of them are, some of them aren't. One of the books I read, I don't know if it even technically counts. It was kind of a misleading book, but we'll get into that. I'm also going to talk about the movie adaptations, because two of the books that I've talked about will have movie adaptations. So I will talk about that as we go. First book I read, far and away the best book that I read, was Nightwing by Martin Cruz Smith. Now, this is the rare instance in horror, especially from this era. If you know anything about the Paperbacks from Hell era, one of the things is they will tackle, quote-unquote, tackle Indigenous and Native American beliefs, but they'll do it in, like, the most, like, offensive ways possible. I'm, like, even Stephen King, like, there's a whole bunch of stuff in Pet Sematary that was like, ooh, that's not good. That doesn't age well. And this one is nice because Martin Cruz Smith is actually of Indigenous descent. So this is a story set on a reservation, and it is really, really good. It actually goes into a lot of things that even modern storytellers don't really get into that much. And that is the vast differences between different tribes of Native Americans. Yeah, so this is right on the border of like the Black Mesa, Los Angeles, Arizona area. And this is mainly, our main character is a person of Hopi descent, and he is a deputy on the reservation, and they have a much bigger Navajo reservation nearby, and there's a lot of interplay between both of the tribes, and kind of dealing more with some of the facts that these tribes have like pre-existing relationships before fucking Americans just threw them all together, and that doesn't just magically go away. So it is a really interesting book in that regard, in that it actually wants to kind of talk about some of the differences between tribes, and also there's killer vampire bats. That's the main thing. There are vampire bats that, when they bite you, they give you bubonic plague. So that's pretty crazy. I thought this book was really amazing, just in the fact that the characters are all very rich. They didn't go to too many lengths to just make them mindlessly likable. These characters are deep, and they have more to them, but at first glance, they aren't instantly like, oh, I love this person, they're the greatest. And I think that was really cool, is that Cruz Smith was not dedicated to trying to make his characters likable. He was trying to make really good characters and really deep characters. And there's really, really harrowing stuff in this. And it's a very mad, angry novel. Martin Cruz Smith, his mother was actually like an American Indian activist. and you can really see a lot of like there's a lot of anger in this. And this has a has a movie version, and the movie version is awful. I watched it like last night, and I was like, wow. The film version of this like removes all the nuance, because like there's a lot of nuance in this. There's a lot of talk about like Native American belief systems and a whole bunch of stuff that I found really, really interesting. And the movie just like removes that, and like most of the cast is people of like Hispanic descent or Italian descent playing Native Americans. And that doesn't age well. The bats look fucking ridiculous. The one thing about the movie that I will give it credit for is that the movie does have David Warner, and David Warner couldn't do a bad performance to save his life. He is really, really a great performer, and David Warner just gives it all. If you're one of those people who are like looking for accuracy in their animal attack books, one, why? Two, it's not about this. Like, this is really kind of talking about what a lot of cultural beliefs, dealing with religious practices to do with the vampire bat and stuff like that. So it is not a simple read. There's a lot of complexities in here. There's a lot of things that it talks about that are just really, really great. And one of the things about animal attack books that is, for me, what I love about animal attack books is always a sense of place. And it's really the idea of you feel like you're in this community, and there's all of these forces going on in this community, all these people who are going on in the community, and how one major catastrophe people together or tears them apart, and how it all works in this system. You know, famously, Jaws, the book and the movie, but more so the book, is really focused on the inner workings of Amity Island. And really, it's kind of like this in talking about the Navajo and the Hopi reservations, and talking about all the people who come in. There's a really, the way that it treats missionaries is very funny. There's like a bunch of religious missionaries in this book, and they're awful people. And I just thought that was fun, because it was a different perspective than you get in a lot of these books. And you know, I'm sure I'm gonna keep reading other, you know, paperbacks of the time that are very, very offensive as far as their indigenous characters go. So I was really happy to read that this is by someone of that culture, and to really get a in-depth view on that culture's experience, and also this killer bats that are amazing. I love this so much. I gave this 5 out of 5, one of my favorite reads of the year. I absolutely love this. I think maybe I'm a sucker for desert reads, because the last 5 out of 5 I gave was Stinger by Robert R. McCammon, which was also a desert set read. So anyways, I'm a sucker for desert set reads. Really in-depth characters, really complex scenarios going on. I'm kind of being a little bit vague because I don't want to spoil too much, because I really think this is a good book. The movie fucking sucks, though. So just don't watch the movie. It's fucking garbage. Although it does have one of the Christian missionaries is played by the same guy who's, I believe, Niles in The Thing. So I was like, oh, that's fun. Next book I read, The Rats, classic. I read this in one sitting. This is everything I just talked about, but minus any nuance. There's no nuance in this book. Everything's really surface level. Characters will literally say some of the themes about, like, government mistrust and all these, like, oh, what's it, our cities are becoming too ingested. Blah, 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 blah. Again, this is a very angry book. This is not a subtle book. This is a silly, silly book. Although it does have some, like, graphic sequences. Those rats go to town on some babies. That's for sure. A lot of dogs. If you like dogs, sorry, don't read this book, because those dogs do not wake well against the rats. This story is basically a very, very British tale about giant mutant rats pretty much invading a city, and just how people deal with it. Our main character is this kind of unlikable douchebag who is a teacher at this school, and the book really stands on its own in terms of its set pieces. They really, really go through the ringer as far as figuring out really great scenarios and settings to put the killer rats in, and I think that's where the book really, really thrives and is great. There's a sequence inside of the school which I think is just great. It's a great sequence in the school, very breakneck pace, very unique and very well thought out, and I thought that was one of my favorite part of the book. I didn't like this book. Does have some stuff that's like little iffy as far as like the way it describes some of its characters. Seems a little bit racist. Some of the stuff in here is a little bit icky, but when it's sticking to the actual Animal Attack books and Animal Attack scenarios, it is good. And the icky stuff is like subtle icky stuff, so it's not like in your face. It's not like reading a Lovecraft story, or it's just always all icky. But there are some stuff where I was like, oh, a little bit, some of the iffy stuff in the rats. The fact that this is a series, though, I bought the other two books of the series because I want to read them now, because I want to figure out how James Herbert continues to utilize the rats. I also watched the movie adaptation, which is Deadly Eyes from 1982. This is kind of hard to track down nowadays. The movie's fucking amazing. The movie's just one of the greatest movies ever made. It opens with Scatman Crothers holding a cat, and you're like, what? It's just Scatman Crothers with his cat, and this cat is like a good cat actor. This cat is like A+ in cat acting from that cat. It's a bit hard to track down nowadays, but if you sail the seven seas, you can find it. Half the reason why I love Deadly Eyes so much is that it's all set in Canada. It's like a super Toronto film. It is very, very obvious that everyone who made the movie is Canadian. Every setting, every place they go is like just reeks of 80s Toronto. And it is beautiful. All of the rats, there's actually, like, one of the surprises about Deadly Eyes is that the rats, like, look pretty good for the most part. They have some really cool animatronics for, like, the actual, like, rat faces, and the rats, like, gnawing at people. And in long shots, they dressed up a whole bunch of Dachshund dogs in rat costumes. So there's all these little Dachshunds, like, running after people, and it's so cute. It's so cute. And it's so silly. Because it's all these freaking Dachshunds just running on their little legs. Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Maybe sometime I'll have to try to set up like a group watch for Deadly Eyes. Because Deadly Eyes is amazing. It does take some like changes and switches stuff around from the book. But it does have a lot of similar set pieces. They don't have the school set piece, which is by far the best section of the book, The Rats. But just for me, everything, like all of the like energy of the movie, all the characters a little bit more likable. There are some weird subplots they throw in, where there's like, for some reason the teacher now has like a student who's just like in love with him, and there's like some very weird scenarios there. There is a hilarious sex scene in this movie. It is so funny, set to like this like classical jazz, like it's like to the level of the original Terminator sex scene, where it has the most ridiculous music going on during it. Anyways, I now have talked more about Deadly Eyes the movie than I have Rats the book. Rats is good, Deadly Eyes is better. That's mainly because I'm Canadian, though. I probably a lot of that is just like, oh, I've walked down that street in Toronto. Like, I know what's going on there. So there's probably a little bit of that. But I did think the characters are reasonably nice, likable. There are some weird conversations, like stilted conversation, directed by Robert Klaus, who is the director of Enter the Dragon and a few other Bruce Lee movies, which is why when they go to the theater, they're watching like a Bruceploitation marathon, and I'm like, oh, that's brilliant. Oh gosh, it's brilliant. It's like so good. It's better than the book. Anyways, that's me. Last book I read for Horror MAYhem was Death Tour. I'm not going to talk about this much, not because it was bad. This is a first-person book, which I was really surprised. So you don't get a lot of first-person creature features because, like I said, like half the reason for a creature feature is like an ensemble cast of characters, and also the amazing things that I always love in most creature feature books is just like this random character you meet for 5 seconds before he gets offed, and it's always like, oh, Jimmy Johns had the worst day of his life. That was his last day of his life, or something like that. And it's like, oh, Jimmy Johns like fell down the stairs and his girlfriend broke up with him, but he thought, oh, things couldn't get any worse, and then the giant rat tore his throat. You know, that if you've ever read one of these books, you know what I'm talking about. These very dumb scenarios and like minor. You just meet a character for like 5 seconds, and maybe it can get to a page, maybe it's half a page, whatever it is, before they meet their end. So that was very funny. This one though, it being first person, doesn't have that because you're in one character's like viewpoint the entire way as you go. It's also not much of an animal attacks book. It's misleading, and I don't want to talk about it too much because I think the reason why this book is so good is because it is misleading, it is unique, and it is pretty scary, and it's pretty unique, and I was really on the edge of my seat for this. This is another book that I read in just like one sitting, and I loved it. I absolutely loved Death Tour. I think I love it mostly because it subverted most of my expectations for this book. And because of that, I want you to remember the name, but don't even remember that it subverts your expectations. This one's kind of hard to track down. My copy, like, legitimately was, like, falling apart as I read it, which I was like, oh, no. And I don't know if this is going to be good on a reread or if this is one of those books that's only good for one read. Maybe in a year or two I'll try to reread this and see if it has the same impact, because I think what had the biggest impact here is that I just didn't know it was going to happen. It was all very unique. It's twisty and turny, and even that might be a little bit too much information for you. But the basic plot of this one is that like a college news team hears that there are alligators in their local sewer, and they want to go and get like a hard cutting news report on the alligators. So they go down into the sewers, and then the rest of the book progresses from there. And yeah, so very good book, mostly because it subverts your expectations. It's not really an animal attacks book. Great cover, misleading cover, but great cover nonetheless. So those are the 3 books that I read for Horror Mayhem week 1. No movie for Death Tour, sadly. Sad. And now I did a few changes to my TBR. When we get to the weeks, I'll show you what my TBR will be. I'm only going to try to get 2 books down here this time. Mainly because one, like I said, I made the mistake of starting the Dark Tower series. That's going to take up most of my time as far as those audiobooks. They're long. But I do have enough time to go through the Cornish Tales of Terror, as I talked about before, Arch Etwin Hayes. And the one addition to this one is I was going through my bookshelf and I was like, oh yeah, I own Robert Bloch's American Gothic. So I will read that because, yes, it's obviously Gothic, but it's also American. The scariest thing. Anyways, so yeah, what did you guys read for Horror Mayhem week 1? What are you guys reading for next week? What kind of animal would you like to attack your city? Thank you for watching, and as always, it came from the page.